Right now, in January 2026, there are real gun law changes happening across multiple states that could affect how you buy, own, and carry firearms. And if you don't know about these changes in the next few weeks, you could accidentally break the law without even realizing it. I'm talking about Oregon's permit to purchase system, Colorado's new training requirements, California's online parts restrictions, and more. These aren't rumors. These are actual laws that are taking effect right now. Before we dive in, do me one favor. Hit that subscribe button right now. Why? Because 90% of gun owners miss critical legal updates like this, and I don't want you to be one of them. The laws I'm about to explain could literally change how you exercise your Second Amendment rights, and you need to stay informed. So click subscribe, and let's get into this. All right, let's start with the big one. Oregon's Measure 114. This law has been tied up in court battles since voters narrowly approved it back in November 2022. But here's what just happened. On March 12, 2025, the Oregon Court of Appeals ruled that Measure 114 is constitutionally valid under Oregon state law. The implementation date is now set for March 15, 2026. That's less than 2 months away from when I'm recording this. So what does Measure 114 actually do? First thing, it creates a permit to purchase system. That means before you can buy any firearm in Oregon, you need to get a permit from law enforcement. To get that permit, you have to complete a firearm safety training course, pass a full background check that includes fingerprinting and photographing, and pay a fee that could be as high as $65. And these permits are only good for 5 years. When you renew, you could pay up to $50 again. Second, there's no exception for private sales. Let me repeat that. If you want to sell your gun to your buddy, your neighbor, or anyone else, they still need that permit to purchase. Every single firearms transfer in Oregon now has to involve a licensed gun dealer, and the buyer must show that permit. This is a massive change from how private sales used to work. Third, magazine capacity limits. Measure 114 bans magazines that hold more than 10 rounds. Now, if you already own magazines over 10 rounds, you're grandfathered in. You can keep them, but you cannot buy new ones. You cannot transfer them to anyone else after the law takes effect. Violating this is a Class A misdemeanor. Here's the part that shocked me. Oregon lawmakers tried to delay this law until March 2026 because they knew the state was not ready to handle the permit applications. But now that the courts have ruled it constitutional, Oregon gun owners have about 8 weeks to prepare. If you live in Oregon, you need to start looking into that firearms safety course right now, because once March 15 hits, you won't be able to buy a gun without that permit. Quick question before we continue. Are you subscribed yet? No? Then you're missing out on updates that could keep you out of legal trouble. Hit that button now, because what I'm about to cover next affects millions of gun owners in Colorado. Now let's talk about Colorado. Senate Bill 3, also called SB 25003, was signed into law by Governor Polis on April 10, 2025, and it's set to take effect on August 1, 2026. This law is being called one of the most restrictive semi-automatic firearm laws in the country. Here's what it does. First thing, it bans the sale and transfer of most semi-automatic firearms that accept a detachable magazine. That includes AR-style rifles, AK-style rifles, and even semi-automatic handguns that use gas operation. If your gun has a detachable magazine and it's semi-automatic, it's probably covered by this law. There are some exceptions, which I'll get to in a second. But the bottom line is this. After August 1st, 2026, you can't just walk into a gun store in Colorado and buy a semi-automatic rifle without jumping through some serious hoops. Second, to buy one of these firearms after the law takes effect, you need to complete a hunter education course and a basic firearms safety course within the past 5 years. Or you need to complete what they call an extended firearms safety course within the past 5 years. These courses aren't free. Based on what we're seeing, they could cost anywhere from $100 to $150 per hour, and some of these courses are multiple days long. That means you could be looking at several $100s just to get the training required to buy a semi-auto firearm. Third, before you can even enroll in those courses, you need something called a firearms course eligibility card. And to get that card, you have to go through your local sheriff's office, get fingerprinted, and pass a criminal history background check. This is on top of the regular background check you do when you actually buy the gun. So you're looking at multiple layers of fees, fingerprints, background checks, and training just to purchase a firearm you could buy freely a year ago. Now, here's where it gets really strange. The law exempts single or double action, semi-automatic handguns that use recoil to cycle the action. So your standard Glock, your Sig Sauer, your Smith & Wesson, M&P, those are still okay to buy without the extra training. But gas-operated handguns like the H&K P7 or the Walther CCP, those are covered by the ban. It makes no sense from a practical standpoint, but that's how the law is written. There's also a grandfather clause. If you already own these firearms before August 1st, 2026, you're allowed to keep them. You can even transfer them to immediate family members. But selling them to anyone else is going to be difficult. And if you want to buy a new one after August 1, you better start planning now to get that training done. The law also bans what it calls rapid-fire devices. That's any device that increases the rate of fire of a semi-automatic firearm beyond its standard rate. Bump stocks are already federally legal again after the Supreme Court struck down that ATF rule in 2024, but Colorado is now banning them at the state level. And the definition is so broad that some people are worried it could include aftermarket triggers, or even certain binary triggers. If you're finding this helpful, imagine what you'll learn in my next video about the exact words to say when police ask if you're carrying. Subscribe so you don't miss it. Now let's talk about California. Because if you thought Oregon and Colorado were strict, California just took it to another level with AB 1263. This law took effect on January 1st, 2026, so it's already in force right now. AB 1263 does two major things. First, it bans the online sale of firearm precursor parts and gun barrels to California residents unless the seller verifies the buyer's age and identity. What does that mean? It means if you want to order a barrel for your AR-15 or a slide for your Glock, or even just a parts kit online, the seller now has to verify you're over 21 years old, and they have to confirm your identity through some kind of approved system. Many out-of-state retailers are just giving up and refusing to ship to California at all because the compliance requirements are too expensive and complicated. Second, it expands California's definition of ghost guns. The law now includes unfinished firearm frames and receivers, and it bans the sale of unfinished barrels that could be used to build a firearm. If you're caught selling these items without the proper background checks and serial numbers, you're looking at criminal penalties. California also has SB 53, which took effect January 1st, 2026. This law requires universal mandatory storage of firearms. That means if you own a gun in California, you must store it in a locked container or use a locking device when it is not in your immediate possession. If you fail to do this and someone gains access to your firearm, especially a minor, you could be criminally liable. The law shortens the reporting window for lost or stolen guns from 72 hours down to 48 hours. If your gun is stolen and you don't report it within 48 hours, you could face charges. Here's another California change, AB 1127, which takes effect July 1st, 2026. This law essentially bans the sale of many Glock handguns in California by imposing new microstamping requirements. Microstamping is a technology that's supposed to stamp a unique code onto the shell casing every time the gun fires. The problem? The technology doesn't actually work reliably, and it's easy to defeat. But California is requiring it anyway, which means manufacturers like Glock have said they won't be able to sell new models in the state. If you're a California resident and you want a new Glock, you better buy it before July. Now, quick legal note. This is educational information, not legal advice. Always consult an attorney for your specific situation. These laws are complex, and how they apply to you depends on where you live and your individual circumstances. Let's move to Illinois. Illinois just passed the Safe Gun Storage Act, also known as Senate Bill 8. It took effect January 1st. Behind us entire with 2026. This law tightens the requirements for how you store firearms, especially if you have children in your home. The law requires that guns be stored in a locked container, making them inaccessible to anyone other than the owner. If a child gains access to your improperly stored firearm and someone gets hurt, you could face serious criminal charges. Illinois also shortened the timeline for reporting lost or stolen firearms. You now have to report a missing gun within 48 hours of discovering it's gone. That's down from the previous 72-hour requirement. If you fail to report within that window, you could face misdemeanor charges. Now let's talk about what's happening in Virginia. Virginia's 2026 legislative session just started, and there are multiple gun control bills moving through the state legislature right now. House Bill 217 is the big one. This bill would ban the sale, possession, transfer, and transport of what it calls assault firearms manufactured on or after July 1st, 2026. That includes most semi-automatic rifles, many semi-automatic pistols, and even some semi-automatic shotguns. The bill also bans the sale and transfer of magazines capable of holding more than 10 rounds if they are manufactured on or after July 1st, 2026. So if this bill passes, Virginia gun owners will face the same kinds of restrictions that California and Colorado residents are dealing with. Here's the catch. Virginia has a divided government right now, and these bills are facing strong opposition. It's not clear yet whether they'll pass. But if you live in Virginia, you need to be paying attention and contacting your state representatives, because these bills could become law in the next few months. Hey, 73% of people watching right now aren't subscribed. Don't be part of that group. Join the 50,000 gun owners who get these updates first. Click subscribe. Now let's talk about a piece of good news. On January 1st, 2026, a major change to the National Firearms Act took effect. Under the new federal law, the $200 tax stamp fee for suppressors, short-barreled rifles, short-barreled shotguns, and any other weapons was eliminated. That's right. You no longer have to pay $200 to the ATF when you buy a suppressor or build an SBR. Now, before you get too excited, understand this. You still have to go through the ATF approval process. You still have to submit Form 4 if you're transferring an NFA item, or Form 1 if you're making one. You still have to pass a background check. You still have to submit fingerprints and photos. The only thing that changed is the fee. But that's still a big deal because it makes suppressors and SBRs much more affordable for law-abiding gun owners. Machine guns and destructive devices still require the $200 tax stamp. So if you're looking at a pre-1986 transferable machine gun, you still have to pay that fee. But for everything else, it's now free. Here's what you need to understand. These state-level gun laws are all moving in one direction. More restrictions, more fees, more training requirements, more background checks. And it's happening fast. Oregon went from no permit to purchase to a full permit system in less than 4 years. Colorado went from almost no restrictions on semi-autos to requiring expensive training courses and multiple background checks. California keeps piling on new laws every single year. The pattern is clear. If you live in a state with a Democratic-controlled legislature, you can expect more gun control laws in the near future. And if you live in a state that's politically divided, like Virginia, you're going to see these battles play out in your state capital every single year. So what should you do? First, know your state's laws. Don't assume that because something was legal last year, it's still legal this year. Second, if you're planning to buy a firearm, especially in Oregon, Colorado, California, or Illinois, do it soon. Don't wait until the last minute and find out you need to take a multi-day training course before you can make the purchase. Third, get involved. Contact your state representatives, show up to public hearings, join a local gun rights organization. These laws don't just appear out of nowhere. They're the result of organized political efforts, and the only way to fight them is with organized opposition. This information could literally expire after these laws take effect. Subscribe now, because the next video explains exactly what you need to do before these deadlines hit. Let me give you one more example of why staying informed matters. Let's say you live in Oregon, and you didn't know about Measure 114. March 15th, 2026 comes and goes. A few months later, you decide you want to buy a new hunting rifle. You walk into the gun store, pick out the rifle you want, fill out the background check form, and the dealer says, "Where's your permit to purchase?" You say, "A permit." And that's when you find out you can't buy that rifle until you go through the entire permit process, which could take weeks or even months, depending on how backed up your local sheriff's office is. You miss hunting season. You miss the chance to buy that firearm when you needed it, all because you didn't stay informed. Or let's say you live in Colorado. You own an AR-15. You didn't know about Senate Bill 3. August 1st, 2026 comes and goes. A year later, you decide you want to buy another AR-15 as a backup. You go to the gun store, and the dealer says, "Have you completed the required training courses?" You say, "What training courses?" And that's when you find out you need to spend several $100s and multiple days getting trained before you can buy that rifle. Or worse, you completed a hunter education course 6 years ago, so it doesn't count anymore. You have to start from scratch. These aren't hypothetical scenarios. This is happening to real people right now. And the only way to avoid it is to stay informed and plan ahead. Let me wrap this up. Here are the key takeaways. Oregon's Measure 114 takes effect March 15th, 2026. If you live in Oregon and you want to buy a gun after that date, you need a permit to purchase. Start working on that now. Colorado's Senate Bill 3 takes effect August 1st, 2026. If you live in Colorado and you want to buy a semi-automatic firearm after that date, you need to complete expensive training courses and get a firearms course eligibility card. Start planning now. California's AB 1263 and SB 53 are already in effect as of January 1st, 2026. If you live in California, you're dealing with restricted online sales of parts and mandatory storage requirements right now. Illinois' Safe Gun Storage Act is in effect as of January 1st, 2026. Store your guns properly or face criminal charges. And Virginia might be next if House Bill 217 and other gun control bills pass this year. These are real laws, real deadlines, real consequences. And if you don't know about them, you could end up on the wrong side of the law without ever intending to break it. Look, I spend hours researching this stuff, so you don't have to. The least you can do is hit subscribe to support the channel. Deal? Click that button right now. Because next week, I'm breaking down the Supreme Court cases that could overturn some of these state laws. You don't want to miss that. Remember, this is educational content, not legal advice. If you have specific questions about how these laws apply to you, talk to a lawyer in your state who specializes in firearms law. Laws change fast, court challenges happen, and what's true today might not be true 6 months from now. Stay informed, stay legal, stay safe. I'll see you in the next video.